Well, hey there, boys and girls. It is your buddy Don here from Southeast of Heaven. Thank you so much for tuning in, and happy holidays, by the way. You know, it's that time of year once again. It's that time to get down to it and hear about what my top albums of 2025 were. You know, I feel like I just did one of these not too long ago, so it's hard to believe that it's already been a year. You know, this year, 2025, was a pretty kick-ass year for music. I heard more great new metal music than I've heard in quite a while. And this year's list also covers a nice range of genres, including classic rock, metal, folk, alt country, alternative. I mean, it pretty much ran the gamut here of music. You know, and looking back on this list, it reminds me that I have a really broad palette when it comes to music, and I love that. You know, I always say if it's good music, I will love it, and I'll write about it regardless of the genre. And if it sucks, I won't even talk about it regardless of the genre. Well, actually, that's a lie. I will talk about it because I do love giving bad reviews from time to time. But anyway, this is a sentiment that I feel like I share with a lot of my peer music journalists, and I hope you will appreciate it as well and maybe find something new to listen to. So, all right, let's stop being nice and start getting real. You're definitely a Gen Xer if you got that reference. But anyway, so here's how it's going to go. I got 10 albums that came out in 2025 that really stood out to me. You know, the cream of the crop. You know, they rose to the top. You know, they never eat pig because a pig is a cup. And on top of that, I have two accolades I like to give. I have one of them, which is the single of the year, because a lot of bands put out singles and not full albums. And then the other one being the Better Late Than Never award, which is, you know, there's a lot of times, you know, every year that I discover a album that just floors me, but then I learn that it didn't come out the year that I'm doing the list for. Like maybe it came out 1, 2, 3 years earlier, whatever. So if I find an album that hits right there where it needs to, and it makes me feel that, then I'm going to include that into the list and give them their own little special award. You know, it's much better than the FIFA Freedom Award or whatever the fuck that was. Anyway, let's get this started here. So, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get started with the single of the year. And by the way, if you guys are going to judge me by saying, oh, he sounds like he's reading from a script. Well, I am reading from a script because I have fucking ADHD. And if I didn't, I would be here all fucking night and you'd be listening to a 3-hour podcast. See how what happened? I just already went off the rails. So anyway, let's start this again. So here we go. So for the single of the year in 2025, it was Nephilah with Clavata live at Sweden Rock 2025. Nephilah teased the fuck out of me by releasing 3 singles this year. First, we were gifted with In Her Hands, You'll Never Be Free, and then Solar Eclipse. Then out of nowhere, here comes Nephilah swinging, firing on all cylinders, then releasing a live version of Clavata. The song was originally on their self-titled debut, but this version is far superior to the version on the debut. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the debut, but when they replaced former vocalist Stina Olsen with Lynn Edlund, this move elevated Nephilah to a whole other level. If these singles are any indication of what lies ahead with a new full-length release in 2026, I think it's pretty safe to say that Nephilah is going to make it to the top even quicker than I thought they would. All right, so for the next one is The Better Late Than Never. Goes to Esben and the Witch with the album Hold Sacred. Now, I love Spotify. I know they fuck artists. Hell, I'm one of those artists. But you can't deny the outreach that it has to people that may never know about your band. It's great for my music as it exposes me to an audience I never knew that I had. The same could be said for other bands because thanks to Spotify, on my home screen, it recommended an album called Hold Sacred by England's Esben and the Witch. I never heard a single note from this band, but the minute the album started, I lit some incense, sank into my beanbag chair, popped an edible, and I found myself on this ethereal journey. Hold Sacred is the perfect after-hours late-night album. Esben and the Witch's Hold Sacred has a Mazzy Star-like quality, but more ambient and maybe even more ambitious, to be honest. This was a beautiful find for me, and I could not have closed out 2025 without at least mentioning it. So yeah, so it's that fucking good. So give it a listen. All right, now here we go. Now we're going into the top 10. We're going to start from 10 and work our way up to number 1. See what I did there? Anyway, number 10 is Dead Guy with Near Death Travel Services. That's a badass name, by the way, for an album. So anyway, New York City's Dead Guy definitely gets the Fuck I Didn't See That Coming award by releasing Near Death Travel Services, their first album since their 1995 debut, Fixation on a Coworker. While the band reformed in 2021 with the original lineup, this was the first time that we're seeing Dead Guy hailed as the band that they are. Iconic fucking masters who helped shape the metalcore genre. And they're finally getting that respect. Near Death Travel Services is a straight up in-your-face platter of metal that will fuck your face. Jesus Christ, what I'm thinking. If you have ever wondered who influenced the sound of Municipal Waste, you can stop here because these guys started it. The production is fantastic and the songs are brutal fun, and at a mere 36 minutes and 25 seconds, it left me wanting more, so a repeat listen is what it got. In a time where a lot of metal seems to be getting soft and somewhat tired, we're lucky to have Dead Guy back to wake everyone the fuck up. Hey posers, leave the fucking hall, because Dead Guy has arrived. Alright, number 9 comes from Julian Baker and Torres with the fantastic alt-country album Send a Prayer My Way. Send a Prayer My Way was another album that I didn't even know I needed in 2025. This comes from former Boy Genius solo artist Julian Baker, who joined up with indie rocker Torres to create one of the best alt-country albums I've heard in decades. Baker and Torres collaborated on all 12 songs, and I was hard-pressed to find one that I didn't think was awesome. Usually on an album like this with 2 collaborators, one will have a more noticeable role. And that's always kind of hard because it feels like it loses cohesion. But with Baker and Torres, they wrote so seamlessly together that it was surprisingly cohesive and it was void of any kind of ego showboating. This is definitely a must listen for anyone who loves great folk rock and alt country music. All right, number 8, we have Castle Rat, The Bestiary. You know, being the old fart that I am, I will forever be a sucker for classic metal, especially metal that has a theme to it. When Castle Rat popped on my radar this year, I was ecstatic. Castle Rat fulfilled everything I love about metal. The Bestiary showcases Castle Rat's massive crushing on the Black Sabbath vibe without going into run-of-the-mill doom, while paying homage to Hawkwind and early-era psychedelic Scorpions. Still, one of the things I love the most is that they are over the fucking top. Led by Riley Pinkerton, aka the Rat Queen, Castle Rat also features such epic players as the Count on lead guitar, the Plague Doctor on bass, and the Druid on drums. Castle Rat manages to pull off the rare task of actually being a genuinely great band with great songs and execution. Seeing them and their over-the-top imagery and costumes is absolutely insane, and while I love it, don't let it turn you away. Castle Rat is the prime example of why you should never judge a book by its cover. All right, moving on. For number 7, we have Children of the Sun, Leaving Ground, Greet the End. So if anybody knows me, knows what a huge fan I am of this band. Swedish psych rock roots rockers, Children of the Sun, returned with Leaving Ground, Greet the End, which they released on their own label, Lovely Eyes Records. With each release, Children of the Sun has matured and grown into a band that continues to push themselves as performers and songwriters. Drawing on influences of psych rock, blues, and even a gentle touch of alt country and folk, this album showcases Children of the Sun breaking out of the hippie rock of their debut and growing even further from their previous release roots. This is their most moody album to date, and I love that because it shows growth and versatility. It also keeps me interested, makes me proud to be a fan, and most importantly, it keeps me anticipating what their next move will be. All right, sliding in at number 6, we have David Gilmour with the Luck and Strange concerts. Last year, I got to knock David Gilmour off of my bucket list, and the wait was definitely worth it. In 2024, Davey Boy toured in support of his best solo album to date, Luck and Strange. 2 sets of fantastic music, which included Pink Floyd classics combined with nearly the entire Luck and Strange album. This showed Gilmour's confidence in this material, and luckily he was smart enough to capture it for releasing of a live album, or a live set, I should say. Gilmour did the right thing by capturing the 24 shows on his Luck and Strange tour, which included stops in Brighton, Rome, London, LA, and New York City, and releasing it as the Luck and Strange concerts. It showcases the greatness of these shows, but my only complaint is that there is little to no variation from the original recorded versions of these songs. You know, where Roger Waters took different approaches and reimagined many of the Pink Floyd songs for his shows, Gilmour played it safe. But with that being said, that doesn't take anything away from the fact that these shows were absolutely magical, and the show that I saw in New York City last year was one I will never forget. All right, coming in at number 5, we have Jacko Jackchick with The Son of Glenn. Ever since hearing Jacko for the first time fronting King Crimson, I immediately fell in love with everything this guy does. His solo album, The Trouble with Angels, became a huge listen for me and one of my top albums of the year that it came out. Son of Glenn finally arrived in 2025, and it wasn't just a follow-up album. It was the beginning of a whole new book of stories. Son of Glenn is chock full of themes that I could connect with on a much greater level than I thought. Themes like loss of identity, nostalgia, sentiment, and longing are not only things that I connect with, but also ones that I've been bogged down with over the last year or so. Musically, there's a complex yet subtle beauty to the arrangements and execution. Jacko also possesses a voice that tells a story and draws your attention in with an emotive timbre and a soothing volume. This is a great album. Incredible collection of songs that I feel like everybody should have. All right. Popping in at number 4 is Sarah McLachlan's new album, Better Broken. Ever since hearing her for the first time back in 1994, I've been a massive fan of Sarah McLachlan's. I loved all of her albums up to the iconic Surfacing album. That was where it ended for me. After that album, I felt like she lost the plot a little bit. I didn't feel moved as I did with her songs. They just lost that magic, so I gave up on her new music. That is until I heard her latest album, Better Broken. When I heard the first single, Better Broken, I felt like I was hearing her for the first time. What I loved the most about this song and album is that she seems to have come full circle, writing as she did in her younger years, only from the perspective of someone who has lived a much longer life. With that comes perspective, comes different focuses, and different influences. So with Better Broken, Sarah managed to recapture what I loved so much about her in the first place, and I felt like I came full circle as well as a fan. All right, for number 3, we have France's very own Mesa and their album, The Spin. Mesa is a prime example of why I love what I do. I was asked to cover this eclectic band for my other family, Ghost Cult Magazine. And as corny as it is, Mesa is one of those bands that just cannot be pinned down by a genre tag. Mesa incorporates elements of doom, psych rock, prog rock, 80s goth, and jazz with a female vocalist, and guess what? It fucking works. The first song I heard from this album was The Dress, and from there, it was a rabbit hole for me. I became obsessed with this album, and I still am. The Spin isn't just one of my favorite releases of 2025, but one of my favorites in the last decade or so. Every time I listen, I hear something different. It's a beautiful thing, this album, but you have to listen to it and experience it to understand it. All right, folks, number 2. Number 2! 22! Yeah. If you got that reference, you're awesome. So anyway, number 2 is Bruce Dickinson with More Balls to Picasso. The concept of re-recording or even quote-unquote reimagining an album is something of a pet peeve of mine. So when I heard that Bruce Dickinson was re-releasing his 94 re-release of Balls to Picasso, that's terrible. All right, at number 2, we have 22! 22! You know, if you get that reference, you're awesome. But if not, it's okay. I forgive you. But anyway, at number 2, we've got Bruce Dickinson, More Balls to Picasso. So the concept of re-recording or even reimagining an album is something of a pet peeve of mine. When I heard Bruce Dickinson was re-releasing or reimagining his 1994 release Balls to Picasso, I immediately got nervous. Like, why was he going to fuck with an album that is so important to me and, in my opinion, perfect? More Balls to Picasso has Bruce revisiting this album and giving it a feeling of completion. Strings were added to Tears of the Dragon, epic keyboards were added to 1,000 Points of Light, and tribal drums that completed the vision for the song Gods of War. So why didn't he do all of these things in the first place? Well, he either didn't have the budget at the time, or maybe they were just missed opportunities. It's absolutely brilliant. Nothing was overdone. It was tastefully perfect, and Bruce gave Balls to Picasso a whole new life in 2025. All right, so before we get to number 1, we're going to count back as a recap here. So number 10, we had Dead Guy, Near Death Travel Services. At number 9, we had Julian Baker and Torres with Send a Prayer My Way. Number 8, we had Castle Rat, The Bestiary. Number 7, we had Children of the Sun, Leaving Ground, Greet the End. In 6th place, we had David Gilmour, The Luck and Strange Concerts. Number 5, we had Jacko Jackchick with The Son of Glenn. Number 4, we had Sarah McLachlan with Better Broken. Number 3, we had Mesa with The Spin. The number 2 we had was Bruce Dickinson, More Balls to Picasso. All right. So the number 1 album, the most listened to album for my year was Roger Waters' This Is Not a Drill, live from Prague. So this was my favorite album of 2025. I listened to this album daily, and that is not an exaggeration. If I wasn't listening to my vinyl copy, I was listening to random songs from it on Spotify. This is hands down my favorite tour of Roger Waters. The track list for this tour and album was perfectly sequenced and performed with so much fire. The versions of The Powers That Be and The Bravery of Being Out of Range are worth owning the album. Also, the opening post-apocalyptic version of Comfortably Numb just tears me to shreds every time. This Is Not a Drill is a glory ride, and it's a representation of the genius and boldness of Roger Waters and his don't give a fuck attitude. If David Gilmour was the beauty of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters is the seedy underbelly showing you all the things that you don't want to see, because reality is fucking ugly like that. And there you go, folks. Southeast of Heaven's top albums of the year. Also, let's give props to Best Single of the Year once more, which was Nephilah with Clavata, live at Sweden Rock 2025. And the Better Late Than Never goes to Esben and the Witch with Hold Sacred. So there you have it, folks. Southeast of Heaven's top albums of the year, along with the Best Single of the Year and the Better Late Than Never award. Thank y'all so much for hanging in with me for this whole year. It's been an incredible year. I've had some really nice growth in what it looks like that I'm engaging some people with the podcast and with the blog. So that is really cool to see. So thank you all to everyone who has been coming by, listening, commenting, or just reading. I really appreciate all you guys do for us. And so thank you. And I guess finally, happy holiday. You know what, though? I can say happy holiday because you know what? You can also say Christmas. No one gives a fuck. Just say whatever you want, you know? Happy holidays, everybody. Y'all be safe. Love each other. Love yourselves. And I will see you back here on Talking the Talk with Don in 2026. And unfortunately for you, you're going to get a lot more of me.